Pretty much everything that NBC News and the New York Times have told you about the war in Ukraine is a lie. The Russian army is incompetent. They claim Ukraine is a democracy. Vladimir Putin is Hitler and he's trying to take over the world. Thankfully, the Ukrainians are winning. None of that is true. Every claim is false. The last one especially, the Ukrainian army is not winning. In fact, it's losing badly. Ukraine is being destroyed, its population is being slaughtered in lopsided battles with a technologically superior enemy or scattered by the millions to the rest of the globe as refugees. Ukraine is running out of soldiers. As that happens, the question will inevitably arise. Who's going to replace them? If the Ukrainians can't beat Putin, who will? The answer, of course, will be us. American troops will fight the Russian army in Eastern Europe. That's most likely, and the assumption is we'll win. But will we win? Probably not, says former Army Colonel Douglas McGregor, a decorated combat veteran who advised the Secretary of Defense in the last administration. The US says McGregor is on the brink of a catastrophic war that could very easily destroy us. Few Americans seem to understand that, but they should. Welcome back to another episode. We unpack the power struggles, alliances, and tensions that are shaping our world today, right here on Spunt. Remember to subscribe to this channel. Thank you. At this point, all of the lies that have been told for more than a year and a half about the Ukrainians winning, the Ukrainian cause, the Russians are evil, the Russians are incompetent, all of that is collapsing. And it's collapsing because what's happening on the battlefield is horrific. Ukrainians now have lost 400,000 men killed in battle. We were talking about 300,000 to 350,000 a few months ago. Within the last month of this supposed counter-offensive, which was to sweep the battlefield, they lost at least 40,000 killed. We don't even know how many people have been wounded, but we know that probably upwards of 40 to 50,000 soldiers are amputees. We know the hospitals are full, and we know that Ukrainian units at the platoon and company level, that's anywhere from 50 to 150 to 200 men, are in piecemeal fashion surrendering to the Russians. Not because they don't want to fight, but because they can't fight anymore. They have so many wounded they can't evacuate them. And commanders are saying, well, if I can't evacuate my wounded, I'm going to surrender, because otherwise the wounded will die. And so they call the Russians and they all speak Russian and tell them on the radio, look, I've got 50, 60 wounded here. I'm going to surrender because I don't want them to be killed. And the Russians from the very beginning have always treated the Ukrainian soldiers very fairly and very gently. So they know they're not going to be abused or mistreated. They know they can actually be exchanged for Russian prisoners in the future. So they're surrendering, and we're going to see this army that we've been spending so heavily on increasingly melt away. At the same time, if you look at this long banana-shaped strip of territory in southern Ukraine that the Russians control, if you go to the northeastern corner of that, south of this city called KKE, there are major offensive operations taking place there right now, and the Ukrainian forces are being swept away in front of the Russians. And again, all of this happens in a way that is just not reported in the West. In the meantime, rather than admit that this is a terrible tragedy that should be ended on humanitarian grounds, if no other, that the killing should stop, as President Trump said, stop the killing, we're going to continue. And this puts the Russians in the unhappy position of marching further west. Because from the very beginning, Putin and his advisors were never interested in a war with NATO or the United States. That's why you've had such incrementalism, this slow grind of movement forward, defensive operations for a long period to build up the force, and then continued offensive operations. They have over 300,000 combat troops in reserve in Russia, and they're sitting there and not being released to fight, because President Putin anticipates the possibility that US will intervene in Western Ukraine. And if they intervene in Western Ukraine, the Russians will be ready for that. And the consequences for the United States and for NATO will be devastating because the US is not ready to fight the Russians. Why are they not ready? I think the readiness has been on the decline for a long time. You've had an almost steady, uninterrupted decline in the discipline that makes soldiers fight. Discipline is a tough thing. We don't always understand it. Discipline is really a form of habit, and you build those habits over time through repetition, but you also build it under stress, under pressure, so that it sinks in. And then you build cohesion within the framework of those units. You don't build cohesion when you're dividing the force on racial grounds, when you're pushing people who are clearly unqualified up the ranks to command, when you're rewarding people for anything other than demonstrated character, competence, and intelligence. All of those things are demoralizing, destructive to military establishments. The Army and the Marines are suffering with it, so is the Air Force and the Navy, and there's no easy fix. And these cracks that are just cracks at the moment will become giant fissures if you go to war. We wrap up this analysis at this point. Did you like this video? Did we say what interests you? If so, we plead on you to share this video to other fellow enthusiasts like you. Alright folks, that's all for this episode. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What geopolitical stories are you most interested in? And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more analysis and insights from the world of geopolitics. We'll see you next time.
That's why we are fighting.